Hi, Fools. I'm Matt Frankel, contributing analyst at The Motley Fool. I'm joined by one of our very own AI engineers, Carl Jewell. Today, we're excited to be joined by Durga Malladi, who serves as Senior VP and General Manager of Technology Planning and Edge Solutions and Data Center at Qualcomm, where he oversees AI connectivity, processors, multimedia software, and infrastructure business units. Those are some pretty big roles, and we're thrilled to dive into all things AI with you. So, Durga, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So first, let's start off with a broad question. What is Qualcomm's overall approach to AI these days?
These days, when we talk of AI, especially in the last 3 years, AI is a technology that permeates every one of our products. And our products can range all the way from, to put it simply, from doorbells to data centers. So, in the IoT domain, consumer and industrial IoT, from wearables to industrial equipment, smartphones, PCs, AR and VR glasses, automotive, networking business, and of course, all the way into the data center. So it's a technology that permeates practically everything. So what's key for us is to make sure that we have the right kind of AI solutions, both classical and generative AI solutions, that straddle all the businesses, and we are able to scale appropriately with that.
I feel like a nice transition. Could you just give your 1 minute definition? What is Edge AI? Because you've already kind of defined all the different devices that it can go into. So what's Edge AI for those who don't know?
From there's several definitions, but at least in Qualcomm, the way that we define Edge AI is it's the first interface towards the human. It's the first place where you have a tangible interface to the devices around you. So in that instance, if you take a consumer viewpoint, that could very well be a smartphone. It can be your laptop. It can be your glasses. It's the first place where you have AI, at least inference, running directly on the device even if the device is not connected to the cloud. So you're able to run pretty large models, generative AI models, directly on the device in itself. So these are like consumer applications. In a vehicle, for instance, it might be your very first interface to what we call as the digital cockpit. It's the first time that you're interfacing with the dash in front of you, and you're talking to it instead of kind of poking at it and using your touchscreen. So that's Edge AI. That's one example from a consumer perspective. But there are other definitions where, in fact, it's not the consumer. You don't exactly get to touch and feel it, but it could be an edge server. It could be an on-prem server in a manufacturing plant, in an enterprise, where once again, you're running AI inference workloads on that server itself. So it's literally one hop away from whoever the end user is. It could be a consumer, or it can be an enterprise or an industrial, a solution maker. And you can actually extend it from there into these days into robotics and other domains where you do see that immediate interface coming in from there. And one of the most important things for us whenever we say Edge AI is the AI inference workloads are running on the device itself. They are not running on the cloud. This is not about the devices taking into account all the inputs, shipping it to the cloud, and getting the response back from there, but the ability to run it directly on the device.
Right. So not API calls. The model is on that doorbell, on that oven you're talking to, or whatever it is, right?
That is
Maybe
correct.
I can
Yes.
follow up here and just ask, what are the benefits of having on-device AI versus cloud-hosted AI?
That's a
And
good
like maybe what are the use cases where on-device AI is really valuable right now?
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe I'll preface it with a couple of attributes over here. Uh, Starting from, it's been almost 3 years, November 2022, when everyone suddenly woke up to this new paradigm or the new world of Chat GPT, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. I want that, and I want that on my device, and as soon as possible. Here's a fun fact. Uh, in less than 18 months, we had models which were significantly smaller than that, but already outperforming that original GPT-3. So there is a tailwind that's coming in just from a pure technology perspective. That has nothing to do with Qualcomm per se, but the fact that smaller models are getting more and more sophisticated, model sizes are decreasing dramatically, at least 10x every year for the same model quality, which means what you could run on the cloud yesterday, you can run on your device today. That's a pretty big deal. As Qualcomm, we have invested very heavily in making sure that we have all the right tools and the capabilities to run these models in devices that you and I can interface with in a very power efficient manner, and where the quality of the model actually still looks pretty good. So we've put in a lot of investments in that space. And when we think of what can you run, so let me just give you a few numbers. So for example, in a smartphone today, you can run uh, generative AI models, pretty sophisticated models that go anywhere from 1 to 10 billion parameters. By the way, that outperforms significantly what you could see in the original GPT-3 back in 22. And by the time you go into automotive sector, you can go up to 70 billion parameters. In a laptop, you can go up to like 20 to 30 billion parameter models. So these are sophisticated capabilities that exist in devices today, and they are genuinely changing the interface as humans to all these devices. And that's what we are really gearing up towards.
So that's actually a good segue into what I was going to ask next. So what makes Qualcomm uniquely positioned to lead in on-device AI?
One question that we looked at right in the beginning when we knew the trend lines for, hey, we have to be able to bring in these large models. And it's not just language, by the way. The combination of inputs can be language, can be voice, can be any image or video inputs coming into the models. The investments that we made here are in multiple dimensions. The first one is we got to make sure that no matter what it is, we have to run these models in a very power efficient and energy efficient manner so that you don't exactly have to plug in your device all the time. Now, these are investments. So when it comes to where does Qualcomm shine? Now, we've been in this business at the edge, living at the edge for a very long time, over decades. So there's a lot of tricks of the trade and a lot of our investments which actually come through very handy for us, whether it's the form factors, the packaging technologies, the right kind of silicon and software investments that we've made over the years. They come out very handy for us when it comes to this. So that's one observation that makes us kind of unique in this space. And second part is we also spend time in making sure that the interface, we are not, we don't actually make the devices which use our platforms. We build the platforms, we are a horizontal player. So we actually get to have a very nice, we have, our vantage point is very different compared to rest in the industry. We get to see both from a global footprint what's happening, and it's a pretty rough neighborhood in the sense that it's a place where we are kind of battle hardened in terms of what we can do at the edge. So we brought all of that along with introducing, when we brought in the generative AI models, we don't create the models, but we are very well positioned to run inference on those models by taking the model, quantizing, compressing, doing all sorts of things to make sure that it runs efficiently. But at the end of the day, the end consumer has to, quality has to remain high. In other words, nobody is going to say, you know what, I really love the fact that we can actually run it on the device, but yeah, it's not in the same league as what happens if it runs on the cloud. No, that's not acceptable. So we want to make sure that the quality remains extremely high. So we've actually done that. So the shortest answer to your question is, why run it on device? Because we can do that. So that's like the shortest answer. Then there's a couple of other interesting attributes which are probably a little more consumer and enterprise oriented. A lot of the models are created using public domain data. It's what is available out there in the net, and then you kind of take in whatever you can. That being said, as an end consumer, I might be interested in some very personal data which might be stored only on the device. I might or not actually be very comfortable with that data being available everywhere else. And the model somehow has to figure out a way of interfacing to the data and using some of that. So there's a personalization aspect of it. We're also beginning to see this in enterprises, because in software enterprises these days, a lot of the employees are beginning to use generative AI tools to do code generation as a starting point. But you want all of that to remain in-house. It's not, again, there are some specific tools that are used by each of the enterprises. It's private data. You don't want this to be somewhere out there. So you can take one of the generative AI models, fine tune it, and then run that within the premise, within the enterprise in itself. So personalization and privacy are a couple of other reasons why you might want to run it on the device, in addition to the fact because you can. The final part is we do take connectivity for granted these days. But if you take a look at all the devices that I mentioned, I said from doorbells to, well, let's put data centers aside for now. If you take a doorbell, if you take a smartphone, if you take a PC, yes, you have connectivity, but the connectivity is there up to a certain threshold, and sometimes you might not have any connectivity at all. If you have a PC, for instance, you could be in your enterprise and you have Wi-Fi connectivity. The moment you walk out, maybe you're actually driving somewhere, or maybe you literally are in airplane mode in a plane, you have no connectivity at that point. Do you then, at that point, go back to the old school way of working? Or do you continue actually using generative AI just like what it was? And the answer is yeah, you want to actually do that. And you can, because you don't necessarily rely on the connectivity. So our perspective is run it on device when you can. If you have excellent connectivity, by all means, run it in the cloud. But it's a hybrid model. It's a mix and match. It's not binary one or the other. That's our perspective.
And based on that, like what in the industry probably needs to change in terms of the AI infrastructure? Besides, I mean, you've kind of already explaining this, models are being quantized and we need to run it on device because we can. What else needs to change or is already changing?
A lot is already changing behind the scenes, especially in a lot of the discussions that we have. We work very closely with the model creators, those who are in the business of creating the models. They need to understand what is possible in the device, and that it's kind of like it's not a circular argument, but there is a feedback loop over here. Hey, I didn't know that you guys could do this. You know what? Now I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to bring in some new attributes. Let me give a couple of examples on this. What is actually clear is that if you if somehow someone buys into the argument that yeah, I want to distribute the generative AI workloads between data centers and devices, let's say that you actually go with that, then what you want to do is make sure that some portion of the inference is run on the device, and maybe for something much bigger you run it in the data center. By the way, training, we are still talking of training on the data center, so make no mistake about it. And we are seeing some trend lines in the last few months where, and that's no surprise because we're also working with a lot of people behind the scenes, of this dual mode of running. And if you've seen the latest announcements, both from GPT-5 and including even from China and DeepSeek, you have this reasoning that's actually, you have like a very quick response that comes back. Or you might want to have a much thoughtful and deeper reasoning based response. So there's already a little bit of a bifurcation of, do you want the answer immediately, or do you want me to think through a lot more deeply and come back with a different kind of an answer? Well, the shorter answer is something that can be done on devices, and the other one can be run on cloud. So there's a paradigm shift that's occurring over here. Similarly, whatever you can infer on the devices, by all means go for it, and the rest of it can rely on the cloud. This is like a split architecture. People are gradually beginning to understand the value of it. Oh, one more thing on top of this. If you're running a data center business, uh, a lot of the times when we talk of data centers, it's all about, okay, what's the capacity? It's like, how many gigawatts of capacity do I have in my data center? And then you say, fine, for each of the racks that I'm going to install, it's going to have a certain, hundreds of kilowatts of power that's consumed in that. So it's all about power, and the economics of that are dictated by your energy consumption. If you have the option of offloading some of that workloads onto the device while still connected to your data center, you'll take it, because this is uh, unused capacity, if you will, in the edge devices. So we do see a trend where if the data center, those who are in the business of providing services from data centers, as they start buying in, you actually tend to use and think of edge devices as edge inference nodes, complementing what you're running on the data center as well. So that's something that is not just a futuristic thought, but it is one of the trend lines, and I would pay attention to this as you move forwards.
All right, so I'm going to ask a question because Carl's an AI engineer. I'm not. So I'm going to ask it from my perspective. So why does edge AI matter from an efficiency standpoint? Can it reduce latency, cost, energy usage, things like that?
So, depending on who's asking the question, you might actually view it in a different perspective. If you're a policymaker, for instance, and you are in the business of saying, okay, I want to have the right kind of safeguards and data privacy as an example, well, you will immediately see, wait a minute, if you run it on device, then we do have personalization and privacy. So that's like one aspect of the policy that can come in. If you're an end consumer and you have varying connectivity depending upon where you are, well, you want to have your AI experience almost invariant to what the connectivity. Sometimes I have excellent connectivity and sometimes I have no connectivity. But as an end consumer, I actually don't care whether I have connectivity or not. I just want to have my AI experience all the time. Well, on device AI actually gets you there. So that is the first thing that any end consumer immediately sees. A third part is, once again, going back to the policy. If you're in the business of saying, okay, you're a policymaker and you're interested in looking at what's going to be my energy grid for the next couple of decades, what is it that I need to do? I know I have to build a lot of data centers, but what can I actually think about? So if you think of what we just mentioned as this hybrid AI architecture, something running in a data center and something in devices, you might go down a different path compared to, I'm going to build out capacity only in the data center. So depending on enterprises, end consumers, or policymakers, everyone has a different prism through which they actually look at the benefits of on-device AI or edge AI. So there's
I
a
remember
cost
the
angle in
first,
those cost of build out of the data center.
yeah, that provides some strategy, some strategic choices for them to offload from the data center. And it also just reminded me the first time I got on a I got on a plane, I was doing my coding, and I lost my Wi-Fi. And then I remembered I had Llama 3 on my laptop running on my NVIDIA graphics card. And I was
There
like,
you
wow,
go.
this is magical, you know? So it really is pretty amazing to be able to have AI run on your device like that, and the value is there. What does the industry need to build to make on-device AI mainstream? We know there's, like you said, there's tailwinds coming from the AI labs and from you guys collaborating. Maybe you can go into that, and also if there's any other factors of what needs to happen to make it really mainstream.
Okay, there's a few places where on-device AI is already available. You can actually walk into a Best Buy, as an example, today and buy a smartphone where you have the capability of running some of the models directly on the device in itself. You can do the same thing for PCs, and many of our we have a very close collaboration with Microsoft, and when the launch of AI PCs occurred last year, you can run some pretty sophisticated models directly on those PCs themselves. The connected glasses, AR glasses, and if you've tried one of our products which actually went into the Meta AR Ray-Bans, these are not, you know, uh, these are not one of those glasses where only tech geeks will have to wear. No, it's not like just for that. No, these are you can walk with those glasses around and nobody will know that these are actually connected glasses. Those glasses, they kind of use at this point in time, they use the smartphone as a hub and then actually do some of the processing there. But the one of the things that is coming up from there onwards is you can actually do some of the processing on the glasses itself. Now if you think about it, that is pretty cool. So these are products that you can buy today. This is not a vision that's coming later, but I would actually encourage everyone to take a look at some of these products. But then there's more. There's a lot more that we can do. And when we kind of look ahead, most of these products right now, I would argue, are still what we would call as demand based. And what I mean by that is you are a consumer. You have a phone, you have a PC, you type in something, or you might just speak and you ask a question and you get an answer. You want to write some code, you type in something, the code gets generated. But this is on demand AI. What we really are actually driving towards is what we call as ambient AI. This is proactive. In other words, it's something that's constantly running in the background, anticipating your next move, your next question, and proactively providing those answers to you. That's like a really sophisticated AI. It's agentic AI as we kind of get into that. It's constantly running in the background and actually helping you all the time. I talk of this as Jarvis if you're kind of into Marvel movies. But it's one of those things where it's like literally like a co-pilot who's constantly working with you, but also anticipating your next move. This is where we are very excited about. So it's going to be a mix and match of ambient AI and on-demand AI when blended together. Today, you can already see on-demand AI in some of the devices already. I would still argue there's work to be done with on-demand AI because you see them in premium products We really want this to occur all the way down into the mass tier products in every single product that we can think of. And that's just a matter of time. That's already in motion, that's happening. But ambient AI with AI agents that are running in the background, that is indeed the future.
So let me pivot a little bit. So what does the rise of AI-equipped PCs mean for Qualcomm's business just as a whole?
So, historically, Qualcomm has, I think it's more known, or it used to be well known when it comes to phones. I don't think anyone had any question on that. Starting from about 2.5 years back, it was around this time in 2023 when we announced we've been in the PC business for a while, but we took it up a notch starting from 2023 when we announced the first generation of AI PCs powered by our custom CPUs, along with our the processors, the generative AI capability inside that PC, and that was like a game changer, if you will. It kind of was an inflection point for our PC business, going from where we were towards a point where, wow, there's a resurgence of interest in PCs. It's something that we've had with us for more than 3 decades now, but all of a sudden, this is a PC that can do a lot more. Much lighter, much thinner, 24-hour battery life, and running generative AI directly on the device itself. These are all new assets that we brought to the table, and since then, it actually has been excellent for us when it comes to how we are doing in the PC business. Now, we are still, I would argue that, relatively new, as in we're not like we haven't been around in the PC business for like 3 decades like some of our competitors have, but we certainly made our mark in terms of redefining how we ought to be thinking about PCs. So, from a business perspective, that's coming along very nicely. Uh, and if I were to expand that question a little further, remember what I said earlier, that AI is a technology that we've brought into every one of our product lines. We're doing extremely well when it comes to IoT and automotive businesses. In addition to that, these are kind of, I wouldn't say greenfield, at least IoT is a greenfield area because it's everything and anything that you can think of that doesn't fit into the normal paradigms. And there, with a lot of our both hardware solutions and software assets, we've made sure that developers have access to our platforms, are able to build all the applications and solutions on top of it. So we're doing quite well in the generic space of compute, PCs, IoT, and automotive.
I know Apple, when you're talking about the developer tools and kind of the ecosystems and the chips, I've been watching Apple. They have the Apple Intelligence, they have their chips, and they have their own AI suite of like a special way of running the models that's, supposedly more efficient. They build their models to work with that, and they make it available for other models to run through that. And I wonder, like, um, how do Qualcomm's products chips differ from what's coming out of Apple, also what's coming out of NVIDIA and Intel and the other competitors?
So I'll make a couple of observations on this one. So first things first, what we did, this is slightly different compared to what we have been doing for quite a few decades now. We wanted to make sure that we make it very easy for any third-party developer to be able to access our platforms and build applications on top of it. When I say third-party developer, these are like the long tail of third-party developers that you and I might not even know, but they are there. So imagine you're some teenager in Indonesia or something, and you want to actually build an app. Now, if you think about it from that perspective, they actually don't care about the nitty-gritty details of what is an NPU, is it custom designed for generative AI, or what's a CPU. They might actually not even know what that is. They live in a different world. I'm one of those developers. I'm going to write my code in PyTorch. That's all that I know. And that's my, maybe I start with that framework, then I pick some runtime associated with it. And I need to have the capability of now built an application. I want to actually test it on some platform and see whether it runs properly. And if it is there, then I deploy my application on some Play Store. Okay. For that to happen, what we did then is made sure that we have all the right software assets. So we launched, it was in February of last year, we launched the Qualcomm AI Hub. It's a one-place stop for any developer anywhere in the world to land. The first thing you're going to take a look at there is there's a catalog of curated models, classical and generative AI models. Pick any one of those models. Maybe you have a specific vision-based application in mind. Okay, so there's like all sorts of models that you might want to pick from. You can browse through the catalog and say, I'm going to pick that. Or you say, no, wait a minute, you know what? I don't like any of these models, but I want to use my own model. We allow for that too. You bring your model, we'll curate it for you to run it on our platforms. You could be an enterprise customer who says, no, wait a minute, I don't even have a model. I actually have tons of data though. Can you create a model for us? We can do that too. So you have all of these choices. So you start with, okay, now you have the model in the bag. At this point in time, don't worry about it. Write your code in whatever runtime and framework that you have. But at that point, you say, hey, how do I test it? I don't have a device in my hand. We provide free cloud native access to a device farm. You log in and you actually get access to it. The device gets wiped clean. You come in, you test out your code, you get all the KPIs from there saying, okay, power consumption looks good, my latency looks good, everything looks nice. And at that point in time, you're good to go. It's like, okay, thanks very much. And then you move on, we wipe it clean, and the next developer comes in. And that developer who built all of this, if you think about it, didn't have to actually have the hardware in hand. And you live in that world, and now you go and deploy in any of the Play stores that you want to think of. So we made it very easy for developers to do that. We also did a few other things. We've been running a lot of hackathons just to kind of test out this thing and just say, okay, keep going about with it. So we're making our platforms far more developer friendly. And that's kind of new for us in Qualcomm, but we're actually doing very well in that space. We've also made a couple of acquisitions in this so as to build up our assets in IoT domain. In each of the domains, you have to actually have different variables. So for example, in IoT, it's very Linux oriented, and then there's other places where it's Android oriented. So we kind of deal with a mix and match of developers. But we also observed one thing, quite a few of the developers actually, if I build an app, actually I want to make sure it runs on all kinds of platforms. Maybe it's on an Android tablet, and maybe I want to do the same thing on some Linux IoT platform at the same time. So these are new muscles that we've acquired over the last few years. So we're kind of well positioned in that sense. Now, I'll answer the question on the comparison against some of the others. I think everyone has their own view of how they're building assets in this space. We are far more open in terms of the diversity of products on which an app developer comes in and you can simultaneously launch on a far more diverse set of products than a lot of the others that we are aware of. They're all doing great, by the way, make no mistake about it, but it's just that it's slightly different the way that we actually approach the solution.
So a minute ago, you mentioned the apps that are being developed. So what kind of apps are already making use of NPUs on PCs right now?
Uh, on PCs right now, we have there's two different kinds of applications. There's always the classical AI ones, which is just based on vision based solutions. But then with generative AI, we've seen a couple of the applications that have come in. They're still going through the Windows Play Store. How they actually eventually come out, but that's what we have observed right now. So stay tuned on that because we haven't made any formal announcements in that space, but you will see more of it coming out.
I guess powering the like Copilot capabilities is a major one though, right? With the Windows Copilot AI PCs, that's the name. Um, they power a bunch of like native AI features. I don't have one myself, unfortunately, but I assume that that's what that's powering on the AI PCs, right?
From Microsoft perspective, obviously they've put in a lot of effort on Copilot and what they called as Copilot and Copilot Plus. We are very close partners with them, but that's their, that's a question really for them. But they've actually spent a lot of time in that and some pretty nice features. I use it, by the way, all the time on my AI PC.
And what does the rise of AI PC mean for Qualcomm's business as a whole?
For us, it's this is now in the high. For us, it's a graduation towards high performance computing, energy efficient high performance computing. For Qualcomm, we've had several DNA mutations over the past 4 decades. Interestingly, you might or not be aware of it. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary. I myself have been in Qualcomm for 28 years. So I've gone through at least a couple of decades through that. We used to be known for wireless communications primarily. Then, gradually, as we started taking steps towards computing, we did very well in smartphones. But over the last 10 years or so, we've taken our steps towards high performance computing in a lot of other domains. PCs and automotive are places where we're not talking about the compute capabilities in PCs and automotive are very different and much bigger compared to what we do in smartphones. And so for us, it's a validation when we came out and we showed our performance benchmarks, how we did exceedingly well against a lot of the competitors in this space. It was a wake up call for a lot of those both in the tech analysts and in the investor community to take a look at it and say, okay, wow, okay, you positioned yourself very well. And now we are on the journey towards the next step as we go towards data centers. And that's something that we are very excited about moving forwards.
So can you give us kind of an overview of the difference of running Gen AI apps on smartphones versus PCs? Like what are the big differences?
Okay. So there's a few differences that actually come to mind when it comes to generative AI on PCs versus smartphones. First, the memory footprint that's available on PCs is actually slightly higher compared to what you have on smartphones, which means you can have more sophisticated and slightly larger models on PCs compared to smartphones. So that's like one of the first level of observation. The second part is that the KPIs are slightly different. Uh, in some cases, when if you're say, let's say that you're actually on a smartphone, and if you think of the use cases on a smartphone, and you asked a question just based on voice alone, and you're getting a response on it. Well, your screen is kind of not that big. So let's say that you have something like 100 tokens per second running on it. That's like approximately, well, it's approximately 2 tokens per word. I can't read 50 words per second for sure. So if it just comes down very quickly, it actually doesn't buy me much on a smartphone. On the other hand, if you're doing a document translation or something like that, and that too on a PC, yeah, it does make a difference. Why stop at 100? Why not go to 200? You want to actually keep increasing. So the KPIs are slightly different. What you can do. So if I were to think of a PC, I would focus a lot more on use cases like code generation, document summarization. I have an email, I want to immediately create like a slides version of that one. Those are the kinds of use cases. These are productivity use cases. There's also content creation and generation, especially by artists in the space. So like you have your laptop with you, and that's where music is being created, some content is being created. Those are like bread and butter workhorses that you can actually think of. This is where generative AI truly shines on PCs. On a phone, I might actually be far more interested in a very personalized AI agent as an assistant, where I use it, I'm constantly talking to it a lot more than poking at it with my finger and using my touchscreen all the time. So the use cases are slightly different. The modalities are also very different because you have sensors that are used. So, for example, if you use your phone and you take your phone and you're just randomly pointing at some building, and you have your earbuds, let's say, and you ask a question, you say, hey, what am I looking at? Now, that use case, by the way, if you think about it, uh, when you ask that question, the question is completely meaningless because to really understand that question, you have to say, well, where are you? Which direction are you looking at? And you put that, and that information is available on the phone. You have your position, from the gyros, you know exactly which direction you're looking at. You put it all together, that's the local context. And then you go into, oh yeah, you're looking at this building, and then you get the right kind of history. That is not something that you wouldn't like take your laptop up and point in a certain direction. So the use cases are more consumer oriented on a smartphone and a little more productivity oriented when it comes to PCs. But the size of the models are also slightly different between these two for the reasons that I mentioned.
I feel like those will continue to converge too, right? I mean, I want to be able to do the heavy tasks on my phone, but maybe 5 years from now or less, hopefully, they'll be equal, right? We'll have agents running everywhere.
Absolutely. AI agents are here to stay, and they're not just a buzzword anymore. I know that a lot of people sometimes think that, oh, that seems like something that's like a gimmick. Not really, actually. AI agents are They're capable of very sophisticated tasks, understanding complex questions and simplifying it, distilling it to make sure that these agents can run properly. And I agree with you, there will be convergence. But at this point in time, if you were to take a snapshot right now, why you use an AI PC versus why you use a smartphone that's capable of running AI inference on the device itself, the use cases are slightly different. But you're right, so there's always something in between with a tablet, so on. Right?
I want to go back to, I mean, you were mentioning it's kind of a unique place. You're in this horizontal place. You're collaborating with the labs that are creating the models, which I would love if you can call out any and every lab you're working with. It'd be really great to know that, but I know you may not be able to. And then you're also working with, the companies that might be deploying them to the edge because you're optimizing those models to get it on the fingertips of the consumers. Um, to me, that seems like a kind of a frustrating place to be at if it were me, right? So you know how to optimize the models best, but the labs don't really know that. Like you said, there's that kind of funny feedback loop. They're saying, oh, okay, you guys can do that. Well, then maybe we'll train our models like this. So kind of a feedback loop there. And then how models are optimized for the edge, but how they're actually used, the interfaces that they're given to consumers in, that kind of builds the whole thing. I mean, if consumers don't really like the way it's presented to them, the way AI might be pushed on them, or the way it's, they're given the powers, it's just it all goes to waste, right? So I don't know, just kind of an interesting place to be at. If you have any
We,
thoughts on that.
we actually, it's been a very pleasant experience because, when we work with the model makers, it's a very collaborative. We've known them for a long period of time. It is true that, for the longest period of time, if you're in the business of making models, you're kind of focused on, hey, it's got to be running on the cloud, so I'm going to actually work on that. But then gradually, as a lot of them realize, no, wait a minute, the action is actually shifting to the edge quite a bit. And that's where the consumers are. That's where the data actually originates to begin with. You can see this trend line. I don't actually have to explain this, but you can see this trend line beginning from 2023 onwards, where everyone who, like marquee model makers, whenever they announce a new model family, it's actually a family of models. You will see models that go all the way down to the smaller models, the 10 and 10 below 10 billion parameters, to hundreds of billions. So it's not like everyone announces like one model every year or something like that. You actually see this family of models. You see the small, medium, and large. That is probably a good representation of how the thought has been evolving in that space. You want to have models that run very nicely at the edge. You also want to have some very large models that run extremely well on the cloud. And in the end, someone will actually end up using a combination of both. So model makers are already going down that direction. I don't have to name names, but you know who they are.
Right, so, looking ahead a little bit, so what part of Qualcomm's business is going to grow fastest over the next few years? Because if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned handsets were what you were known for the longest time. It's still the biggest part of your business, but in the recent numbers, it's IoT devices that have been the biggest growth drivers. So where do you see the biggest opportunities over, say, the next 5 years?
That's a very good question. I'm going to actually refer to we had a public facing investor day back in November of last year where we kind of articulated how we see the business growing in each of the different segments. And I'm going to pick out like one statistic that we actually outlined to the investor community overall. It's on YouTube, so you can actually take a look at it over there as well. We believe, and we kind of said that we by fiscal 29 we want to be at a point where everything that's outside handsets, it's approximately 50% of our business, and handsets continues to be a very robust growth, but it's going to be just from an overall pie perspective, it's like a 50-50 split between handsets and everything outside handsets. And when we say everything outside handsets, it's a combination of PCs and automotive and IoT as a broad segment that includes everything. At that point in time, we didn't say anything about data center. Everything else is basically an upside on top of it. But the overall pie, the TAM, is actually expanding quite dramatically for us in that space. So it's part of our diversification strategy that our CEO Cristiano outlined starting from 2021 onwards.
I want to go back to my question just about where you sit, and it's great to hear. It's been very positive so far. But I wonder, how does it feel compared to, we have Elon building, I forgot how big the data center was, got a million NVIDIA's graphics cards. And then you have Apple, like they're fully integrated. They own the full stack, full ecosystem. Um, how do you how do you think about the competition between Qualcomm and those companies?
So maybe I'll say a word or two on data center, and that might actually help. So when we first, we partner with a lot of the names that you actually mentioned, but maybe just a word on the data center itself. So when we took our high performance compute solutions, the same AI processors and our CPUs, and we started building them out at scale towards what might be applicable in data centers, we sat down with a large number of our potential customers and said, okay, these are the solutions that we have. What is the opportunity for us to work together? And actually, it's been a very pleasant journey. I think the first leading indication for that was first back in May, where we had an announcement first in the Middle East, where as they are deploying in Saudi Arabia, as they're deploying their data center build out, we are one of the partners. There are a couple of other partners, but were one of the three partners that was actually announced there. It was a pretty big deal. It was also, I think, for the first time, everyone took notice and said, no, wait a minute, okay, it's not like there's a reason why they picked you, and this is for the data center, by the way. This is not for devices that we are talking of. But subsequent to that, then towards the tail end of May, you might have seen this, but there was an announcement made by NVIDIA. Jensen was on stage, and at Computex, he made the announcement of what he called as NVLink Fusion. It's the first time NVIDIA made the announcement saying that if you take a rack, within that NVIDIA rack, there is an opportunity for third-party CPUs to be part of that rack, complementing our GPUs. So you actually have a mix and match of that. So that's the fusion architecture. And our name was mentioned along with them. So we are kind of gradually working with a bunch of our partners and growing in this space that way. Pay attention to this front as you move forwards. In our most recent earnings, we mentioned the fact that we are doing very well with in this space, and especially with some of the hyperscaler discussions. So just stay tuned on this front. As you can see, we have a vision, we have a view of, we have a built up our capabilities. We first wanted to prove ourselves in domains like compute and in automotive. We are very confident of our high performance compute capabilities. We now are pretty confident as to how they scale into the data center. So we kind of got our confidence, built our capabilities in that space. Now we are ready for the next step. So we're very well positioned. And remember what I said about the hybrid AI, where you do a mix and match of data center and products, consumer and IoT products. You can see now, you can connect the dots and see how we are actually thinking about AI in the next few years.
So just a couple more questions that I have. So one of the biggest hot button issues around AI is privacy, safety, trustworthiness of the models. How is Qualcomm involved in the shaping of those conversations around safety and trustworthiness when it comes to AI on devices?
One of the things that's an excellent question, by the way, because we wanted to make sure that we address this in conjunction with all the products as they're getting rolled out. Because one of our worries was that, hey, when okay, we get all the technology right, and then we are just about to launch, and someone says, no, wait a minute, how do we know that it's actually safe? As an example. So back in the day, we joined a consortium called ML Commons. It's a place where some of the safety standards are written. And we worked very closely with regulators. But in there, we said, hey, we have to bring in what are the right kind of safety standards that we want to have, because these standards will be applicable to devices as well. So from our R&D team, we actually focused on certain benchmarks that come out from there. So there is a way to measure safety. So for instance, let's say that we have a product which is about to roll out in a device. Then you make it go through the safety standards tests, and you get like a score that says, yep, this is safe, and you're good to go. Because, by the way, you might have noticed this, but there is no universal standard that's out there, at least not many people are aware of. Everyone says my model is safe, but actually it's their own internal testing that they have done, and we trust that. But there's no standardized way of doing it. This was back in the day. So ML Commons was one of the places where we brought in safety protocols, standardization of that, and the mechanisms to test, verify, and certify those things. So you can have this mass rollout of products moving forwards. So as Qualcomm, we actually invested there. We actually have some leadership position in that space as well as we attend these standards meetings. And that's what we are using as we go forwards. I had mentioned the fact that AI agents are going to be more and more important in the future. So beyond the silicon and the software tools for app developers, we also built in additional software which are capable of, you can actually take that and build an agent on top of it. But there are others in this business who actually bring in their own guardrails, which are applicable to devices. So we work with those partners too. Bottom line, it's not just Qualcomm. We actually bring in our assets. We have our own solutions as well, but then we complement everyone else to make sure that this is done in the right way. Because this is a very important question as we move forwards.
Yeah, AI safety is important, and when you're compressing the models to run so efficiently, that's definitely a concern. Like, will it still be safe to run, answer the right type of questions, not answer the right type of
Absolutely. In
questions?
fact, I'll give an example of that. If you take a model, let's say you have a model that runs pristinely in the cloud, and somehow we did something and we compressed and modified it, not modified it, we compressed it, quantized it, made it run in an energy efficient manner. Now it runs, okay. And I say that the loss in accuracy is 0.1%. Okay. Then you take both those models, you make them run through exactly the same set of safety tests that have been standardized. And if you see no difference between the two, you're good. That's the metric that we're using.
Yeah, no, that's super, and that makes it easy for developers as well, right? That they can
Yes.
trust to deploy on Qualcomm. And I think the focus in the AI hub, the dev tools, is great to hear from a developer like myself.
Yeah.
So I want to give you the last word on the future of AI. So for the past year or so, I've been in, every so often I'm in meetings with Carl and the rest of our AI team, and I'm constantly surprised at what AI can do. So looking forward, what does the future look like? Like, what's going to surprise consumers and just what are we going to be surprised about next with AI? Like, when's the next Chat GPT moment or things like that in the next several years?
The last 2 years, so I'll just give like a very quick answer to this, but maybe there's a punchline that definitely want to say here. But let's go back. Okay, I wasn't there in the 70s, but let's say that in the 70s, a human machine interface was defined by command line. You see this black screen in front of you, there's some green font in there, and that's how you actually have your interface to it. In the 80s, we shifted from there to graphics and a mouse, and that was the personal computer. It was a personalization of it. And by maybe around mid 2000s, when the first touchscreen started coming in, for the last 20 years, 2 decades, we've been living in this user interface which is based on us poking at some screen and touchscreen, and that's pretty much it. But if you think of the holy grail of where we are going with AI agents, I would argue that AI is the new UI. That is the user interface to the devices towards you. It's going to fundamentally change how you use devices around you. Uh, if you were to if you were to take even a smartphone today and across the entire planet ask people, do you really know every single setting that you can change inside your smartphone? 99% of the people wouldn't know that. But we are asking the wrong question. Why should they know? They shouldn't. They might just have to just use it in a different way. And you just say, it's too bright. Can you actually dim that? Done. That happens. And that's the way that you want to talk to your device. It's a different kind of a user interface. So to us in Qualcomm, we have gone out and stated this, that AI is fundamentally changing the user interface to devices. So we said AI is the new UI. So that is the thing that I'm looking forward to. And that's probably the one thing that consumers will be like, wow, that's an inflection point. It truly is changing things.
Say that's such a good point. They say humans use 10% of their brains. I probably only use 10% of what my smartphone can do. It's such a good point. It's been so great talking to you, Durga. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Carl, for coming up with some great questions, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks for having
Yep.
me. Really a pleasure.